Okja is brought to us by South Korean filmmaker Bong Joon-ho, writer and director of 2013 sci-fi thriller Snowpiercer and more recently 2019's Best Picture winning Parasite, and follows a young girl's treacherous journey to rescue her best friend Okja, who is a giant fantastical super pig, from the captivity of the sinister Mirando Meat Corporation. So on a conceptual level, this story is absolutely exceptional, being both incredibly absurd and incredibly genius. Not only is this narrative a touching story of friendship and sacrifice, but it's a brilliant vessel for a chillingly relevant commentary on animal rights and on the global meat industry. I am by no means vegan. I even ate a scrambled egg like 15 minutes before recording this review. But this movie seriously, genuinely made me consider never eating meat again. And I don't think any film has ever affected me on that level before. This movie, just like Joon-ho's other films, is incredibly well directed and is an absolutely riveting watch. But what's so incredible about Okja specifically though, is how Joon-ho and the visual effects team were able to bring the character of Okja to life. The integration of CGI is some of the best I've ever seen for a massive digital character like Okja. I mean, there are scenes where it looks better than others, but it's just astounding what they were able to accomplish with this character in this movie. There's one scene where there's this like stream coming down with a waterfall, and the way Okja is able to interact with water is just mind-blowing. Water CGI is notoriously hard to make look convincing, but in this film it looks absolutely true to life, and it's definitely some of the best water CGI I've ever seen. But one of the biggest pieces of bringing a massive digital character like this to life are the performances of the actors that have to act across from it. And in this movie, those performances, especially the performance of the young talent Seo-hyun, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, are absolutely perfect. And they really help, especially her, they really help to make the character of Okja feel like a real tangible thing. And without those performances, this movie wouldn't be half of what it is. And on the topic of acting, even beyond considering the special effects aspect, there's some really standout performances here. Tilda Swinton is, as always, magnificent in the film as one of the kind of villains of the story. Dano, who you might know as one of the main stars of There Will Be Blood and more recently Prisoners, also shines in this movie as one of the leaders of an animal liberation group that shows up later in the movie. And I think this is my favorite role of his. Even though it's a bit of a smaller part than he plays in other stuff, he gives a really nuanced and intelligent performance as this very morally interesting character. Before seeing Okja, I'd never really been blown away with Dano, and I was even a bit skeptical of his casting as the Riddler in Matt Reeves' upcoming Batman film. But his performance here really impressed me, and after seeing him in this role, I have no doubt he's going to make an excellent Riddler. And I think he's going to go on to do really great things after that. Because Dano, you can tell in this movie, he is going places. Jake Gyllenhaal is also in this movie, but in a role really different from what you might expect from him. He plays this animal-loving TV personality who is kind of the poster boy for the whole Super Pig competition, which sets the backdrop for this film. But by the time this film takes place, Gyllenhaal's character is kind of washed up and reminds me almost of Ace Ventura if he took a dark turn into alcoholism. But Gyllenhaal really breathes life into this really emotionally fascinating and outside-the-box character, and turns what would have otherwise been a kind of minor side character into a really sad and tragic part of the story. Also, Devon, who you might know as Roderick from the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies, the original ones, is also in this movie as one of the kind of comic relief characters that is part of that animal liberation group that Dano leads. And he brings that same fun energy to this movie that he brought to those Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. And even though it's in a more serious setting, he works as a great comic relief for this film. And his kind of familiar presence is an absolutely welcome addition to this film. And I thought he was definitely worth mentioning. I also want to talk about the musical score for this film, because I really liked the choices that were made for the soundtrack here. There's a lot of like Italian sounding classical music that's used in this film, especially in the chase scenes and the action scenes. And surprisingly, it works incredibly well while also giving this movie a really distinct musical feel, which really helps to create a really unique tone that sticks with this movie. It's also very well edited. Even with all the different stories that are going on in this movie, the pace never drops and everything is given just enough time to really sink in. When you have all these different pieces of a story that have to come together but all develop individually, it's hard to maintain a balance between them. But Okja absolutely excels in creating and maintaining that balance. And so its editing is absolutely phenomenal. Okja can get really intense at times. The ending of this film especially, I won't get into spoilers, but it is just relentless. The last 20 minutes of this film leading up to the climax are incredibly white knuckle and intensely emotional. Some of the sequences in this movie are genuinely hard to get through, especially if you are an animal lover. There's some seriously disturbing and heartbreaking imagery in this film's climax, and really throughout a lot of it. So do be aware that there is some stuff in this film that some viewers might find upsetting. Okja touches on some really relevant issues facing the world of global meat consumption and food production. And it addresses these issues in some really creative and always organic ways. The commentarial parts of this film never feel forced. Overall, I'm going to give Okja a 9.5 out of 10. I highly recommend watching this movie. Even if you don't have much interest in the subtext of the film, it is an absolutely riveting story with some seriously suspenseful moments. It will definitely keep you on the edge of your seat. But as I mentioned earlier, this film is not for the faint-hearted, and there is some seriously disturbing stuff in it. So definitely be prepared to question your dietary standards. Okja is on Netflix, so definitely be sure to go check it out if you have time this weekend. If you like this, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for new reviews coming very soon. I've been Max, this has been Maxify Film Review, and I'll see you in the next one.